What's up, wrestling fans? It's time for another edition of The Voice of Wrestling right here, of course, on voiceofwrestling.net and newly on Fight TV. You can check them out at FITE, fight.tv, and also check out their app. Download it in all your app stores. That's FITE. And, of course, I'm Chris Cash alongside Nick Paglino there in New York City. Man, are you was the weather crazy there? I've heard lately it's been crazy.
We have been having some insane weather. We've been having these nor'easters. We've been having snow. We've been having rain. We have been having weather.
Just straight
a lot of weather out there right now.
There is a lot of weather out there.
There seems to be weather everywhere.
You know, I've heard that, and I tell you what, the weather in the wrestling world. Look at this segue, buddy. It's brewing. It's brewing up a storm because Daniel Bryan. Our main topics, and don't forget, guys, we're really excited. Nick and I don't know how long it's been, Nick, that you and I have interviewed a guest on The Voice of Wrestling, but we've got a damn guest tonight.
We do.
Formerly of Impact Wrestling. He actually had a little stint in WWE, I found out after the interview, and I wish I would have brought that up, just kind of curiosity about it. But he did most of his run, obviously, in Impact Wrestling. He's got a new podcast out, which is absolutely incredible. You need to check it out. But ROBBIE E is going to join. Had a pre-recorded interview with him, just me and him, and we're going to be airing that in just a few. But we have a couple of massive topics to talk about. On last week's VOW, Nick, you and I discussed a little bit about Daniel Bryan and what WWE needed to do and the fact that it'd be a crying shame if he was medically cleared by all of their experts and they didn't give him an opportunity to get back into the ring. And I don't think people, and of course we might as well jump into it because that's what people want to talk about and where it's going to go and what they might do. We got a little bit on SmackDown more than we did Raw, obviously. But I don't think people, just to kind of sit back and breathe this in, the relevance of this, of the ramifications across not just wrestling, but sports in general. Yeah. This isn't your typical leg injury or something that people aren't expected to come back from. This is concussion-based in a lot of ways. It is serious head trauma that caused them to not want to release him for as long as they did. Took 2 years to finally get to the point, and he could have given up a long time ago, which really does make this story that much more remarkable. But Nick, talk a little bit about just kind of the weight and the magnitude of someone like Daniel Bryan with his medical history at this point, overcoming this to get another opportunity to get back into the ring with that type of physicality. It is monumental in so many ways.
It absolutely is. I think it definitely, I don't know what you were doing. I don't know how you were celebrating your Rusev Day when all of a sudden the news broke.
I was celebrating Jinder Mahal.
I see.
It's
been Jinder Mahal a year for you,
dude. You know what? It was relevant too.
About one day.
Jinder Mahal, man, went in there and cut a remarkable promo about no respect.
It was remarkable. And you know what? And I actually haven't even told you this. You got one of those big screen TVs because I got one of those, those big flat screens.
Right.
If you go back and watch some of Jinder Mahal's recent promos. If you do it with the big screen and then you mute your television, you mute the audio, wow, powerful. They are powerful interviews. You don't know what he's saying,
right?
But man, just the magnitude.
The magnitude
you want to talk about magnitude
of those facial expressions, right?
Watch him with the sound off, or just shut everything. Cut all the power in your house.
The entire
and just
power.
Sit there in darkness and silence,
right.
And really let that
sink in a little bit. Yeah, I believe it would.
How I like to take
I think it would still move you. But he talking about no respect from you people. You only
ain't gonna get any respect out of me,
man. Anyway, but nevertheless,
we'll see. But listen, not to digress too much. Yes, I was in the middle of celebrating my Rusev Day when news broke, and I think you hit it right on the head when you said the magnitude of this, not only in professional wrestling or for Daniel Bryan, but across all sports platforms.
Yeah.
Because I think the major reason why Daniel Bryan wasn't cleared in the first place is because of everything that they're discovering in sports, specifically the NFL. You know, and you've got films like Concussion that came out that are sort of, dealing with the subject of not only concussions, but CTE. You have the whole Aaron Hernandez saga that's been going on with of course, his tragic story, which then, was sort of capped off by the revelation that he had the most advanced case of CTE at someone for his age that has ever been seen.
Yeah.
So, what effects did that play into the life that he led? And then, of course, the horrible tragedies that took place in his life. So I think that WWE's motivation for not clearing Daniel Bryan was definitely what a concern concussions and CTE have been in mainstream sports outside of professional wrestling world. If CTE or concussions were not an issue in football and were not and the Aaron Hernandez thing had never happened, I bet you WWE would have cleared Daniel Bryan a long time ago. But because this has been such a huge mainstream topic in America, they had to be extremely careful with clearing him. So yes, this has huge ramifications for not only people that are in his situation, not only the sports world now, because people can look at this and say in other sports and say, all right, well, let's use the Daniel Bryan model as to how we deal with concussions and potentially CTE. I know CTE wasn't anything that was being discussed in Daniel Bryan's case, but the two sort of appear to maybe go hand in hand as we're talking about overall brain issues. So not only is there a major effect where all of that is concerned, but in general, the therapy that he was going through, we talked a little bit about this before, the hyperbaric chamber treatments that he was receiving, that guys like Joe Namath and other sports stars have been using and have had great success with.
Yep.
This speaks highly toward the success of that and potential, therapy and remedies that can be used in that regard for other athletes. So this is, so while the professional wrestling world is reacting to the consequences, the immediate wrestling consequences, and of course all of us as fans are thinking about, well, what does this mean for WrestleMania, and what dream matches are we going to see with Daniel Bryan possibly going up against Nakamura and AJ Styles? And, we're sort of in our wrestling bubble. Really, there is so much more now that can be discussed and potentially learned from outside of the professional wrestling world. So this has just been some monumental news this week.
And I watching SmackDown, wondering how they were going to go with this interview. Obviously, he had to address the Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn stuff. We'll talk a little bit about that. But I've never been happier to see someone get their ass kicked in the middle of the ring. I mean, he went all out, man. I mean, he was throwing them drop kicks in the corner.
That was 2 years.
It was it was exactly. All right, this is my chance. You could tell he's a little ring rust, a little slow, but man, them drop kicks into the thing. He was taking everything and flipping his whole body, landing on his neck. The guy didn't give a shit. The power bomb onto the side of the ring looked vicious. I mean, they're like, all right, Daniel Bryan, you're back. Let's see what you can take right out of the gate. But it was exciting to see. And I think one mishap, because of all the coverage, Nick, mainstream and otherwise, that was given to his ability to come back, I feel like they had one slight slip up in just the sense that I felt they could have done a little bit more with a direction. And I feel like Daniel Bryan's direction seems more than clear to me. Yes, he might have some pit stops along the way, which could include Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. I don't know that they're going to look at him as far as a Ronda Rousey situation where he needs to kind of come into the ring a little lightly, get his wheels back under him and stuff. I don't see that being the case with Daniel Bryan. I feel like let him train on his own time, which he's probably already been doing somewhat as far as staying in shape, but let him train, let him get ready for a great match. And then his story and his direction, to me, Nick, is easily defined, and that's his road back to the top. He's got more momentum now than you could possibly imagine. He doesn't need much help in that department. He's going to be organically followed and supported all like through and through. he needs to be working his way back to the title picture nonstop. It doesn't matter how long it takes him to get there. The fans will follow him on that journey. It's already been proven in the past, and he's got such a remarkable, natural story that obviously they're going to follow it even that much closer and more support. So I feel like, Nick, I felt like it was a lot of rambling about doctors and stuff, which, again, it was good to get it out there.
Yeah.
But there was no, I don't know when, I don't know where, and that's what we're left with. And I feel like the build-up now, Nick, that people are already looking at it, everybody knows he's getting back into the ring. Everybody knows he's going to work. Maybe not this WrestleMania. But a lot of your momentum from all the coverage and everything leading up to that first SmackDown promo, now if it's 2 months before, right after Mania, at Mania, that we decide where is he going to fit and belong, which we'll talk about a little bit today, you've lost a little bit of that momentum and that steam and the energy in the room because, all right, well, 2 months from now, it's not going to mean as much. Tell us what you're going to do. And I feel like that was the only mishap. I was expecting him to be like, I want the title. I feel like I was wrongly, it just seems like that's where he's got to go.
I don't know. I can't say that I completely agree with you there because I think because this is not totally storyline motivated. True. Because this was a real situation where, doctors, I mean, from all of our reports, Daniel Bryan himself was only notified about his clearing the day before he made that announcement on SmackDown, which presumably would have been Monday at Raw. So for him to, he's processing all of this within sort of a 24-hour period, and another thing that I think you have to consider is that he is going to be held to different standards than other wrestlers as they proceed forward with him in the ring. In fact, we now know that unlike other members of the active roster, Daniel Bryan, he has agreed in his return agreement, he has agreed to undergo impact testing and also neuropsychological evaluation from backstage doctors after every single match he competes in WWE. So, if his in-ring return, let's say, for example, it is what we sort of all think it's going to be, which is that tag team match alongside Shane McMahon against Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, if that's his first match back, that means as soon as that match is over, when he goes through the curtain into the gorilla position, he's going to have to go directly into the trainer room, and he's going to have to undergo impact testing. And he's going to have to do that for every single match to make sure that his bell has not been rung, so to speak, at any point during the match. Now, what WWE might be doing then, knowing that that's the protocol for Daniel Bryan after every match, I mean, could you imagine if they had come back? The return storyline that they had for him was he makes this grand announcement on SmackDown that, hey, not only am I back, but, they could have done some whole thing where he said, well, everybody knows my contract is expiring in the fall of this year. And I was going to leave because WWE, and that actually was the truth, if WWE did not clear him to return, he has said publicly in interviews he was going to leave and he was going to wrestle somewhere else because he wants to get back in the ring. So he could have turned that into a storyline and said, hey, look, WWE didn't want to clear me. I was going to leave. They said to me, you are cleared. You can return to the ring. And I said under one condition. I don't care that Nakamura won the Royal Rumble. I want AJ Styles for the WWE title at WrestleMania. And if it doesn't happen, then in September when my contract expires, I'm out of here. And I'm going to Ring of Honor. They could have run that storyline. They could have changed the match. They could have made it, they could have maybe inserted him into the match where it's a triple threat. But imagine something horrible happens. And he gets into that ring and he has that first match. And it's a singles match for the title. And he goes backstage afterward and he's found to be concussed. Sure. Well, now all of a sudden these major plans that you have, shooting him right back up to the top. What if he wins the match? Yeah. And he becomes the champion? And now your champion is concussed. and they have to completely pull back on that.
Yeah.
I think maybe WWE is, and listen, teaming up with Shane McMahon against Owens and Zayn, who are two of your top guys in SmackDown, it's not like that's not a high-profile match. I get that they're still putting him into a big-time matchup at WrestleMania. But I think this allows the matchup, in the tag matchup, allows him to be protected. It allows the other three guys to do a lot of the work so he can get in there, start taking those bumps. Afterward, he can get checked out, make sure he's clear, and sort of slowly progress him back into those classic 15, 20, 25-minute Daniel Bryan singles matches that he can have that ultimately take a lot of toll on his body.
Well, and you're right. We are in untrodden territory where, it's unprecedented at this point that they have someone that's going to now have to go through these protocols, that's come back from an injury like this, that they don't know how long it's going to sustain. Will it hold up? They're not positive. I mean, he hasn't been working in the ring, so it's really a matter of they're going to take a precautionary approach. And I get that. I feel like he's still, if you're going to let him go, you got to let him go. And it's got to be storyline driven. Sure. Now that it's over, now that the real part has been discovered and it's done and it's out there, they've got to give him, they've got to at some point now utilize him for everything that he has. And in today's environment in pro wrestling, a true megastar like Daniel Bryan is and can still be, as far as just his support and how over he is, it's desperately needed. Yeah. So you need him on top of your card, whether that's still on the SmackDown side with kind of a different breed of top stars like your AJ Styles and your Nakamura's. Obviously, we assume maybe there's going to be some changes after WrestleMania. I don't care where you put Daniel Bryan. He's desperately needed in terms of drawing power and star power right now. And I think it's now on the flip side of that, Nick, I don't know if ProWrestling.com, if you've posted anything recently about whether or not he is, if it's definitive, if it's really a sure shot that he's going to be working at WrestleMania. Obviously, they left that a little bit untold after his SmackDown appearance.
Yeah,
I feel like it's somewhat of a dangerous move in a sense that I want them to throw him into it and like, hey, I'll work my way back up to the top, whatever it takes. But my plan coming back is to put the world heavyweight, whatever, one of the world championships around my waist again. That is why I came back. That's where I'm going. That's where I'm heading. Mark my words. And how I get there, I don't care, but it will happen. And start that journey. And then that can have pit stops along the way, such as Daniel Bryan and Shane McMahon versus Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. That being said, Nick, I feel like it's a dangerous move to a degree, in the sense that I have other plans in a sense for Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. I don't think they just fired them. And I know Daniel Bryan and Shane McMahon's, all of that's going to be in the works. That's a natural storyline. It's heading there, and it should. Sure. But man, if there's ever a time where you can really try to kind of blur the lines between reality and fiction, it's with a couple of guys like Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. And I'm not, and I don't want to I want to be careful where I don't say, please recreate the NWO or a Nexus or whatever. But let's take a raw, organic storyline with these two that have now been fired. And that's not something that happens every day, Nick, where you have two fired wrestlers, even if it's storyline or whatever otherwise. What are they going to do? And clearly it's leading up to Daniel Bryan and Shane McMahon in some form or fashion, most likely. But what do you do in between it? Because it might not happen at WrestleMania, Nick, and you can give us some more updates on that. But I like the idea of slow burning that a little bit and also taking this opportunity to build up Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn even further, who truly, I think together, they are real money. And I think they have a very good opportunity here if given that creative freedom and opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, again, nothing, of course, has been confirmed. No matches have been announced yet for WrestleMania, but I really don't think, as far as, forget about what the exact matchup actually is. I think this is a very similar situation to that of The Undertaker and John Cena. They would never have had Daniel Bryan even reference WrestleMania. In fact, they probably wouldn't have broken this news until after WrestleMania. They probably would have, because all of the reports that we're getting have indicated that WWE actually cleared Daniel Bryan about a month ago. About 4 weeks ago, something along those lines. That's sort of when WWE knew that they were going to grant him that clearance. And then, of course, he was informed well after that, the day before he made the announcement on SmackDown. I don't think they would have said, listen, let's go ahead and break the news to Bryan.
Right.
They broke the news everywhere. Mainstream media was picking it up. ESPN, CBS Sports, Los Angeles Times, all were running stories of it within, 15 to 20 minutes after the announcement was made.
Yep.
You had major superstar reactions. It was all over the internet. Sites like ProWrestling.com were picking it up. This was 24 hours before Daniel Bryan then went on SmackDown. They were promoting all day on SmackDown that he was kicking off the show. There's no way that they would have done this just weeks before WrestleMania if they didn't have some plan for him to compete in some fashion. I think if WWE makes the announcement that Daniel Bryan's going to be the special guest referee, or that, he's going to be suspended above the ring in a shark cage for that match and not get physical and not get involved, it's just a major waste of the announcement. Add to that the fact that Daniel Bryan's standing in the middle of the ring. He's referencing the WrestleMania sign, or you can't see it here, but I do have a giant WrestleMania sign that's hanging right here. Just like the one that's in the arenas. It glows. It lights up. Every night before I go to bed, I get down on one knee. I do the Undertaker thing. I stick my tongue out.
Yeah.
I look up at the WrestleMania sign.
I believe
and my wife is like standing in the corner, just
I believe that,
sobbing.
I believe
what the hell is this guy doing?
I believe that. Yeah.
And so. And she won't accept my WrestleMania match challenge, which is really upsetting. But sorry. I don't think they would have ever had him even reference that if there wasn't the plan.
Yeah, but if you remember correctly, Nick, I don't think he really, obviously when he started to, I don't know when and where, all of the fans started pointing to the WrestleMania sign. It really wasn't him.
I'm going to tell you what, it was, or are we just talking about when did that all start happening?
What?
Wait, you mean the sign pointing? Wrestlers pointing to the sign?
No, well, I'm talking about that particular promo. It really wasn't Daniel Bryan referencing WrestleMania.
Well, it appeared to me, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it appeared to me as if he was standing there and he was looking at he didn't do the
No, right, but
point,
I think
he was looking at the WrestleMania sign as if to indicate this is when I want to come back.
What I recall is when he said, I don't know when, I don't know where. Then the fans start pointing to the sign, and of course he looks up and he's like, making reference to what they were saying, and then of course he came back to. But either way, I agree with you. I would be surprised. I just don't think they had a choice. They announced it when they did because they knew it would get out there eventually. That hey, WWE
would get out there, correct?
And so they announced it. They had to go with it. They had to bring him back. They kind of really the way they slow rolled that so much and dismissed the idea of when and where is the reason why I'm hesitant to say they're prepared to put him in an actual match at WrestleMania. Now, not to say that it won't happen, but they've got a long ways to go to get there. When they just fired Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, they've got a long way to get there, and not that much time anymore, Nick. So you don't need a lot of build up to that tag team match, but I'm just not convinced they're going to do it. Not that I'm not going to love to see it if they do, but I don't know at this point, and I kind of hope for Sami and Kevin's sake that maybe they don't. Maybe they give them an opportunity again to take a week or two off. Maybe they come back through the crowd at WrestleMania or at any point and let them do some Raw organic. They don't really have a right to be there. They're taken off by security. NWO style type stuff, which we haven't seen something like that in a while. It could work again, especially with a couple of guys like that. And I think the creativity of where they decide to go with Kevin and Sami Sammy is going to be really interesting because it's already a foregone conclusion as far as Shane and Daniel are concerned. How do they get, and those guys are over in their own right. Let's get Kevin and Sammy over with this gimmick. So I'm really looking forward to it. But as we wrap up on Daniel, and we've got a couple other things we want to discuss, I do want to say that it is great to see him back, Nick. I'm very interested to see how they go about it, and I don't think it's really going to be that long. Maybe next year's WrestleMania, if everything goes well with all the protocol, all the matches between now and then, you're going to see Daniel Bryan in the main event, wrestling for the title, and most likely holding that over his shoulder or over his head at a nearby WrestleMania very quickly. I think that's if everything holds up, that's where it's headed. Nick, the other thing this week, though, and I want to start off with you giving your reaction to this, because I think you and I might tend to disagree on this just from our off-the-air conversations about it, but the Deletion match, it was something, and so let's kind of discuss a little bit about what you thought of the delivery. There was kind of some of the fans are either hating it or loving it. Also, Michael Cole kind of putting it down before the match happened was really an interesting scenario that a lot of people are kind of picking up on. But where do you want to start with this? Because you and I might disagree slightly. I don't know if we will or not, but let's what do you think? What did you think overall when Raw went off the air?
Well, overall, Ultimate Deletion, when Raw went off the air, I pretty much felt the way I've always felt about this. And, for those of you who might be new listeners, new viewers to the show, I want to start by disclaiming that, I have the utmost respect for Matt Hardy and Jeff Hardy, more specifically Matt Hardy, because the whole idea of the broken universe, the Woken thing, it's Matt Hardy's brainchild here. And I just have so much respect for the fact that these guys at their age who could simply be a nostalgia act, and we know it works as a nostalgia act because they returned at WrestleMania as the Hardy Boys. Their original music, certainly Matt Hardy was doing this thing, which kind of got the crowd doing the delete. And he had been teasing the broken gimmick even from the time he returned.
Sure.
They were the Hardy Boys. And they got a massive pop, and they were hugely over with the fans. And they are a team that could have just really rode out the rest of their careers as a nostalgia act, as Team Extreme, the Hardy Boys.
100%.
But what Matt did in Impact Wrestling was phenomenal. It was nothing short of phenomenal. It was risky. It was edgy. It was, let's take something that has never been done before. Let's create this entire universe.
Hold on. Can I stop you for a minute? I want to stop you for a minute because we're gonna run out of time on this conversation. I think the way I want to take this is very interesting and maybe something that other people won't. Nick, you and I are in wrestling media. I ran WrestleZone for 5 years. You ran WrestleZone for, what was it, 4 years? Something. I mean, it's been a while. You also now over at ProWrestling.com, doing your thing there, running a website there. I want to ask this because a couple of our mutual friends, our mutual buddies, I notice a trend, and I think it's a problem as it relates to what you and I do and how we try to form objective opinions for our shows like VLW that we've had now I've had obviously for 14, 15 years off and on. You've been a part of for 10, 12 years. I mean, you and I have been doing this a long time, even before we got into running popular wrestling sites and doing stuff like that. But I think there is a serious issue, Nick, when it comes to people in our position talking about wrestlers such as a Matt Hardy, and let's specifically focus on him because he is one of the more accessible wrestlers you're going to find in the business, right? And I don't want to make a joke here, but every week we're going to talk about Jinder Mahal. If Jinder Mahal was accessible and you could reach out to him to talk about some of the behind the scenes things, what's going on in his career, maybe you would be a little more in favor of Jinder Mahal. And I'm sure you know by now where I'm going with this. Matt Hardy, in a sense of his in-ring work, what he's done in some cases, and you talk about risk. I mean, you're really putting this over like he did something that very few people can do, and I'm going to give him credit for something, but taking a risk in TNA in the state of which TNA was, and taking, like, to me, that's not risky. Throw anything at the wall at TNA because of where TNA is, whether it works or not. How are you really? You're not damaged at that point in any way, shape, or form if it doesn't go over. You're giving this guy a lot of credit for something that, yeah, could have worked, could have failed. It doesn't matter. It was TNA. It was Impact. It was a blimp on the radar in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah,
and here's the reason why I also think that it resonated with so many people, because of the fact that Impact was small pond. He's big fish in small pond. He's accessible. He can interact with all the dirt sheets. He interacts with the reporters. He's a guy that will talk to you if you simply reach out to him. He did interviews all over the place. He can sell it. He's personable. He's likable. He's a guy that you can talk to on a one-to-one level, which is not normally the case, in general with wrestlers, but also especially those once they go to WWE, you can't do it. But some of these guys that are kind of what they consider close personal friends with a guy like Matt Hardy, the guy can do no wrong. And let me say, the guy's been out of shape over and literally has just seemed to not really care at various points of his career. Give him credit where it's due, and I'll give him credit in a couple of places too. But let's not really put on a platform and put him on such a high pedestal for throwing something against the wall at Impact Wrestling. I just feel like, and I also,
I'm not. Well, I think you're taking this to mean, first of all, I'm not saying any of what I'm saying from any kind of personal standpoint, whether I like Matt Hardy or not. I think anyone that puts forward some kind of unique work and is taking some kind of a risk, I think I think they deserve applause. I'm not saying induct the guy into the WWE Hall of Fame as a result.
That's what wrestling is built around. Everybody that doesn't.
I give the guy credit at that point in his life, at that stage in his career. Look at how many guys from Impact, look at how many ex-WWE guys, the Booker T's, the Kevin Nash's, the Mick Foley's, the Ric Flair's, the Rob Van Dam, have gone to Impact Wrestling just for the paycheck. They've done nothing. They've gone there. They've cashed their paycheck.
Well, all right. But let's not. Look at a guy like
Bubba Ray. Look at Bubba Ray Dudley. Bubba Ray Dudley's another guy who went to TNA,
reinvented himself,
gimmick, created the Bully Ray thing, and for a long while there, for quite a good, decent amount of time, he was one of, if not the top heel
100%
in professional wrestling.
Completely reinvented himself.
Because he completely reinvented himself, So what I'm trying to say here, because this isn't even the point that I'm trying to make in all of this. I wanted to disclaim this because, like I said, if we do have new viewers or listeners to the show, I want them to understand that this comes from a place of respect for Matt Hardy
fair enough.
for what he's doing. But my point is,
subjective.
I didn't like it. I don't like the stuff. I don't like the broken stuff. I am more of a wrestling traditionalist.
Yeah.
I prefer good technical in-ring matches. Give me AJ Styles versus Shinsuke Nakamura in a 30-minute technical wrestling match over the Ultimate Deletion or the Impact Final Deletion, Broken Universe stuff. Give me the wrestling over that.
Yeah.
I want to make it clear, though, that, I respect anyone who says, well, I like the entertainment aspect of it more. If someone says, hey, I like the promos and the vignettes and the backstage sketches, that's why I like wrestling. Certainly, that's your opinion. That's what you get out of it. When you're talking about entertainment, you cannot boil it down to one thing and simply say, well, no, I don't like guys that say, well, wrestling has to be this. It's got to be 20-minute technical matches, or no, it's got to be comedy. It's entertainment. It can be whatever it wants to be. And whatever you like about it, I don't want to criticize. I'm just saying, my opinion, I don't really love it. The one thing that I did find amusing about the Broken Universe stuff in Impact, the TNA version of it, was the tongue-in-cheek humor.
Sure.
Senor Benjamin's shovel, when they made reference to him burying with the shovel and they said, the man with 3 H's, taking a shot at Triple H, burying people. That stuff's really funny. even in Ultimate Deletion, the mower of lawns, when he was, that was really funny. But honestly, some of the stuff building up to the match was funnier and better. When he cut that promo on a giraffe, I don't know if you saw that, but he released a video that was leading up to Ultimate Deletion where he said he thought a giraffe was a reincarnated version of George Washington. Right. And he's just sitting there talking to this giraffe. And he's like, "You're an old, wise soul. You led the country." And that was amazing to me. That was really funny. A lot of that comedy and humor was absent in the Ultimate Deletion. It seemed like they were trying to turn it into something very serious.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Me, when you try to take professional wrestling out of the ring, and I'm sure you'll agree here. When guys get into like backstage fights or when they do like the parking lot brawls, they're still doing wrestling moves. Yeah. But they're not in the ring. And it just seems ridiculous to me. Yeah. When a guy does like a side Russian leg sweep in the middle of the street, why would you ever do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's something that just doesn't translate well. So I am not a big fan of the Ultimate Deletion type stuff. I like the fact that it's a little bit different. But for me, if they're going to keep doing it, if there's a future to this, which, after Michael Cole made it very clear.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that yet.
WWE does not like this, which, by the way, and here I am now saying, that it wasn't for me. I was almost offended by that. Here's a company that's going to put effort. Well, I guess they didn't put much effort into this. Matt Hardy did most of the promotion on his own. And certainly WWE did no favors to Bray Wyatt and Matt Hardy in this feud. We were just talking about this not too long ago on the show before Ultimate Deletion. We both agreed that this feud's been terrible. The whole Woken Matt Hardy gimmick has been really nothing. They've boiled it down to Matt Hardy and Bray Wyatt just laughing a lot at each other. And both of them cutting incoherent promos.
Yeah.
But you sent a crew out to North Carolina. You shoot this 15-minute, basically short film that you're going to air in the main event segment of your show, and you're going to bury it in front of you're going to set it up by immediately burying it and having your announcer. And I don't blame Michael Cole here. We all know he's being produced. He's being told what to say.
That didn't come from him. Yeah.
That did not come from Michael Cole.
Yeah.
You're going to have your lead announcer say, "I apologize for this," and call it obnoxious. That is just in such poor taste. And to me, it's like certainly the company didn't know how it was going to go. They didn't know how people were going to react to it. Social media exploded after it. So maybe WWE was happy about that. But I really hate the idea of them saying, "You know what we're going to do? On the off chance that this sucks and it doesn't work, we're going to cover our asses by having Michael Cole apologize to the fans." And then if it goes over well, WWE is going to tout the massive success of Ultimate Deletion. Yeah. Afterward. Hindsight's 2020 after you had your lead announcer bury it. So I absolutely hated that. But overall, maybe I'm not the best person to really talk about this entire kind of presentation, because I just don't really like stuff like this. And especially the way WWE approached it with don't you feel like they just went too serious with it?
Well, and I feel like I feel like WWE approached it with a little disdain as it was. And I think that's where the Michael Cole comment came from. And I don't know that I blame WWE in the sense, because here's what they knew going into this match. You've got the diehard fans of Matt Hardy and Jeff Hardy, and the guys that obviously followed both WWE and Impact. And then you've got some kids that might get some pleasure out of it. Right. Otherwise, though, you've got the other half of the world, and I don't know that spread half.
Maybe not
half.
Even half.
Right, exactly.
Maybe 75% of the fans.
Absolutely. That are like, for example, just the prototypical girlfriend in the room that's watching with you, not a huge fan, but likes Randy Orton because of his physique or whatever, or watching.
They kind of know it. They know the delete aspect of what Matt Hardy does.
And then they're watching this with you, and they're like, "What the hell is this?"
I watching?
And I think that was the part of it. Michael Cole can kind of get away, with some of those comments of, "Yeah, I apologize for this," because he can kind of play that up with other people just as much as Corey Graves picks and chooses when he wants to be a heel commentator. I mean, it's kind of that gimmick where they can kind of get away with that occasionally. I'm with you, and I'm surprised that you I didn't know where you were going to go with it exactly, but obviously you and I are on the same page. I thought it was just nonsense, and not in the sense that I think Matt Hardy isn't creative, because I agree with you there, and that's where I'll give him his respect. He's extremely creative in a lot of ways. But here's the thing that I think that WWE has a hard time dealing with. Somebody that gets over on such a personal level with their fans on social media. Matt Hardy was one of the first. He was always massive brands on Twitter. Jeff Hardy too. Fans loved him. Why? Again, because he was always so personable, and he was just so when he left because of the Lita Edge triangle, I respected the shit out of him for rebuilding himself off the air, getting his job back, and then WWE shit the bed there too. That was. Now, going to Impact and just having fun and being creative, that was easier to me. If they would have started that in WWE, there's a good possibility that it would have still gotten over in some ways, only because it would have been new and fresh. I think fans that knew of this gimmick in TNA had such high expectations, and that with WWE's thumbprint on it, it fell short of their expectations. They didn't have a lot to work with. WWE obviously never really put it over, with the exception of, again, some of the promos of them laughing hysterically back and forth, which just went on too long and got redundant. I don't blame Matt Hardy for the failure or the success of this gimmick, of this entire match, of any of this. I think I'm going to be so I really want to hold judgment only to see how WWE responds to this now that there is an actual breaking point there. I think Matt Hardy sticks with this for a little while. I think they decide whether or not it's going to have legs. I think he stays in that mid-card, role for a while. I think the other interesting part is that this is a clear-cut way to allow Bray Wyatt to take a little time off and come back with something unique. They could tie him with Matt Hardy still if they wanted to, or they could just bring him back and say, we want to give him another fresh run, which you need to be careful with. Bray Wyatt was money in this role. He was so good, and I do think that he needs a little bit of new life breathed, back into him, but I feel like don't completely change his gimmick. And the river of reincarnation or whatever, when I think of reincarnation, it means literally he's going to come back reincarnated
as something else.
And please be careful with that. I think that you are going to see some of that when he gets back. Clearly something's going to be different, and I just don't know what it is. I don't think Bray Wyatt was ever the problem, though. He just got a little stale. So you don't need...
But, here's the thing, man. If we're going to make predictions here, and this is kind of a great way to sort of...
we still got Robbie E, baby.
You look at Matt Hardy and everything he's done in his career in WWE, he's never broken through that proverbial glass ceiling. I don't think WWE has ever, and we talked about this, not too long ago, I don't think WWE has ever regarded him as anything other than a mid-card talent. They have absolutely buried the Bray Wyatt character. They had endless possibilities of what they could have done. I mean, I feel confident to go on record as saying that is the single most squandered gimmick WWE has ever had. They just consistently did nothing with one of the most talented performers they have ever had on the mic, in the backstage segments. I mean, even if you look at him during Ultimate Deletion, it takes a pretty damn good actor to be able to pull off the nonsense they were doing in that. And Bray Wyatt did it so well.
I agree.
Dealing with a drone coming down in the sky. The fact that they've done nothing with that guy is just it blows my mind. I don't think there's nothing, there's no precedent that has been set with Bray Wyatt and Matt Hardy to give me any indication that when Bray comes back, however he comes back, if he continues to feud with Matt Hardy, that there's any reason to believe this will ever be great or be given much more weight. If WWE deems that Ultimate Deletion was successful, obviously the third hour of Raw dropped in viewership, but you cannot blame that on Ultimate Deletion. The third hour of Raw has been dropping for over 2 years now consistently. The general consensus there is Raw is just too long. That third hour has always been a viewer suck for WWE, so you can't blame that there on Ultimate Deletion. I guess how would they gauge the success of Ultimate Deletion? I guess in fan response, and it did really well on social media. So, maybe they thought that it was successful, but really to me, all that would indicate is maybe we'll see another one in 6 months and it'll be sort of similar. Maybe all it'll indicate is that Matt Hardy will continue with the broken, woken gimmick as opposed to going back to just being one of the Hardy Boys when Jeff Hardy makes his return, which is, he's been cleared to return. So that's any time. That's any time now.
Guys, we want to know what you think, obviously, about Daniel Bryan, his future, and, of course, what you want to see happen with him. And then also Absolute Deletion and Matt Hardy, Bray Wyatt, some of the things we talked about tonight. Michael Cole's comment, where you thought that come from. We want to know what you think, obviously. Check us out on voiceofwrestling.net, of course, on Facebook at VOW Live. ProWrestling.com, obviously, and we're really excited about our new partnership with Fight TV. Check out their app. Download it. It's FITE for not just Voice of Wrestling programming, but a ton of combat sports programming. And there's some other wrestling stuff on there, MMA stuff. It's a lot of great content, and we're excited to start working with them as well. But now I'm excited, and we went a little bit over. So, guys, if you want to stick with this, I really encourage it. My conversation with Robbie E was a lot of fun. He's a really, really good interview, and I hope you like it as much as I enjoyed doing it. And, of course, check out his podcast as quickly as you can. He's going to explain a little bit more about that in the interview. But Nick and I will, of course, see you next week right here on VOW. Thanks for joining us, guys. We'll see you then. All right, what's up, wrestling fans? We're back here on the Voice of Wrestling with a special treat. And as a matter of fact, a lot of people have been asking us about this since we made our return. As most of you know, Voice of Wrestling has been around for 15 years, technically. We started kind of going off and on about 5 or 6 years ago. And since we've returned, we have not had a guest, an actual guest. It's just been Nick and I talking wrestling, kind of building things back up. In the last 3 months since we made our return official, we haven't had an actual guest. And I remember the very first guest I ever had on the Voice of Wrestling like it was yesterday. And I have a feeling that today will be no different, kind of our first guest since we've been back. I've never interviewed, of all the interviews that I've done over the years, our first 10-year run with the Voice of Wrestling, I remember a lot of them. And of course, D'Lo Brown, as a reference, was my first ever interview. I was nervous as hell. I've had a little bit of practice since then, but I'm excited about this because I've heard of this guy. I've been behind the scenes producing some shows where he was a guest. He's always entertaining. He's got a new podcast out himself that we're going to talk about that I'm also excited about. I just listened to the first episode earlier today. It was fantastic, so I'm looking forward to picking his brain, podcaster to podcaster. He kind of entered our world. But Robbie E, formerly of Impact, has done a lot of stuff. Amazing Race. He's been all over the place. He joins us now on the Voice of Wrestling. Robbie E, thanks for joining us. I'm looking forward to it.
Hey, I have some great news for you. I am going to be a much more memorable guest for you than D'Lo Brown.
The D'Lo Brown. I would think so.
Do not let D'Lo hear me say that, of course, but I am.
I'm pretty sure D'Lo does not listen to our show, and I haven't talked to him in a while. Otherwise, I would cause a fight and send it directly to him. But I do remember it like it was yesterday, man. I had about 15 pieces of paper with damn near every question I could possibly ask written out. I've changed my approach and my style a little. I kind of like to free flow it a little bit, just to kind of get a more organic conversation. But I'm really looking forward to talking to you about. So let's jump right in, and I want to kick it off because I think it's relevant to kind of what you're doing these days, and maybe your story in the wrestling business. There's a couple of similarities that I see. Your new podcast, Wyatt Ended, which has a huge buzz around it right now. Everybody and their mother in life in general, but especially in the wrestling business, has a podcast, it seems. And now you come out of the gate firing on all cylinders. I think it's moving up the charts. You can kind of give us the update on that. But Wyatt Ended, you can check it out on iTunes and WyattEnded.com. It's a unique approach to podcasting. It's not just talking head stuff, and I really want to pick your brain about that. But tell everybody real quick just kind of what the show is about and why you decided to get into it.
Well, when I left Impact Wrestling, obviously I had some more time on my hands, and I'm a wrestler, so of course the first thing that popped in my head was, now I got to start my own podcast. But then I actually went against it a little bit and said, you know what, maybe like if I do that, people will think like my career's done, and I don't want that because I still am a full-time active wrestler. So I kind of said, you know what, I'm not going to do the podcast. So I waited a few months, even though I had this really cool idea that I loved. And then when I talked to Court Bauer and I hooked up with him and I told him my idea, when I saw how much he loved it and thought it would be great, I kind of had second thoughts, and I said, I am going to give this thing a try. So I hooked up with Matt Kuhn, who is my co-host, who also edits the show and everything, who is fantastic. He is like the man with the plan.
Sure.
And he's, helping me out a lot. And my idea basically was, because I feel like a lot of podcasts are the same when wrestlers are interviewed. It's
Absolutely.
Just kind of same questions. We know these guys' story already. It's the same guys making the rounds. Hell, I've made the rounds, and I've said this is my same story. So I feel like that gets kind of played out. And I wanted something different, which is why I came up with Wyatt Ended, which is basically guys that we all, me included, have forgot existed. They don't really do indies. They vanished from conventions. Their careers kind of got cut short quickly, or just, guys that have vanished where when you hear their name, you're kind of like, holy shit, I do want to know their story. And, it might be guys that had 3-month runs or 6-month runs or 2-year runs back in 82, or anyone that you saw on TV for a little bit that now you don't, and you don't know what happened to them.
And the first episode had a guy that I remember pretty vividly. A lot of wrestling fans will, but Glacier was one of your first guests, and it was a great interview, man. I mean, hearing his stories. Obviously, he was front and center for a while. He was kind of in line a pretty big push, and things kind of got derailed a little bit for him. And like you said, he's a guy that just kind of fell off the map a little bit, and nobody's really heard from him. I'm assuming he's staying semi-active as well. But he was a fun interview for you, and I assume that the guys like Glacier is kind of the epitome of the type of guest that obviously you're kind of going for.
Yeah, I mean, whether you thought his character was a joke or you actually did like him, no matter what, when you hear it, everybody, if you were a wrestling fan in the late 90s, of course you remember the karate guy Glacier and his entrance and everything. So he is, yes, a perfect guy where it's like, oh my God, like, what happened to that dude? I want to hear his story. And let me just say, he really might be like the nicest human I've ever met in my life. He is such a nice guy. So It was a pleasure getting to talk to him. And the guys that I'm choosing are guys that, because we have a long list of guys that we want, are guys that I was fans of, or I knew when I was a fan and I was a kid growing up. So they're going to be fun interviews for me because I'm not just, going through the motions. I actually want to know these guys' stories too. So it's really, it's exciting for me also.
It's called Wyatt Ended, WyattEnded.com. Check it out on iTunes. They're moving up the charts. You've had a lot of good success, man. The feedback seems to be great. And of course, we'll plug it again towards the end of the interview. I really want to dive into some stuff because I've been looking forward to this interview since I found out we were going to have it a couple of days ago, because I honestly remember, I know you're done with Impact. We'll get a little bit into that and kind of what you're doing now, what your goals, your your aspirations are. As you mentioned, you're an active wrestler, so your career is far from over. And I've heard some of your interviews. I've heard some of your statements. I know you're not the type that's going to badmouth TNA. I do want to talk a little bit about your run there, because I personally, and I'm not just saying this, I wouldn't say this just because you're on the show, I honestly thought your potential was a little wasted in some cases. I think that you had a great spot there. They utilized you a lot of the time, except for obviously towards the end, which seems like a good reason why you maybe decided to exit. But I really, really liked your role there, and I thought organically and naturally, there's just some guys that kind of have it. You know, they really do. They just have the ability on the mic, the ability to entertain, the look, the ability to wrestle. And you seem like you were one of those guys kind of stuck in a gimmick that was fun and unique as long as it wasn't too cheesy and pushed over the top. But you ran with it and you dug in. Was it easy for you because it's kind of is that kind of your real life gimmick, or was that just a complete separation of how you actually are off camera?
No, I mean, it's a little bit of me. Like, granted, the Jersey Shore thing, I mean, was just thrown at me. I was just there for a tryout, and they knew I was from Jersey.
Sure.
So they just kind of said, spike up your hair and fist pump that afternoon in my tryout match, and it all connected. But, I mean, I'm also, like I said, I'm from Jersey. I used to love the show, the Jersey Shore. I went to all those clubs, you know. So it was kind of very easy for me to adapt to that. So it was kind of me. The wackiness I bring to it is really me.
Right.
So that all worked. But through the years, I mean, Robbie E was Jersey Shore first. Then he kind of changed a little bit and got a little more serious when he was with Big Rob. And he had his, you know, instead of a bodyguard, I had a bouncer and the lift before Jericho had it, and then the rope, and then all that stuff, which was cool. And then, you know, and then I moved into being with Jesse when we were the first ever reality tag team in history, because there's never been two guys from from two different reality shows teaming together, which I thought was pretty cool. And then we got even a little more serious. So it's kind of like I kept getting, even though I stayed being Robbie E, it kind of got more serious as the different characters changed. But at times, do I feel like I could have, you know, done more, had more opportunities? Of course, but every wrestler does, you know. It is what it is. You take it and you make the most of it. I mean, dude, I lost to a girl in front of 10,000 people on national TV. It is what it is, man.
Well, but you know what? I look at, obviously everybody has their roles in the company. Not very few people, very few wrestlers in the business going back decades, you know, truly get on top and stay on top forever. There's a lot of, you know, cyclical part of people's careers. As much of the wrestling business is obviously cyclical, as people say, so are wrestling careers. And so you can reinvent yourself over and over again. And you kind of always stayed steady and true, which I think was great for you as far as what potential you obviously had. But when you look back in totality on your time there, and you don't have to go negative to obviously answer this, you know, honestly as well, but do you look back on it as far as just your character and what you achieved there? Is it, at least in semi way, because I know you're probably a competitive person too, is it a disappointment for you? I know the opportunities you got as a result maybe paid off and you don't regret it, but would you say that you're a little at least disappointed in the totality? Not that you had a bad run. I don't want you to take it that I mean it that way, but how do you look in hindsight at your time there? What was it, 6-7 years?
I mean, honestly, like you said, except for the last year when I just kind of lingered.
Sure.
I mean, I was a television champion. I won the X Division title within my first few weeks in the company. I was a 2-time tag champ where I won the titles once in Tokyo, Japan, and once at Bound for Glory, which is the biggest pay-per-view of the year in San Diego. So I look back at some of the things I did, and I'm like, no, I did a lot of cool
You had
shit.
a good run, yeah.
And then on top of that, I was regularly in the mix somehow for the most part of my time there. I was featured, and I mean, you know, granted, there was a lot of things. Well, first it was dealing with Cookie, and then I loved Rob Terry, but he was very green. I loved Jesse, he was very green. So I was throwing a lot of obstacles where, you know, things could have went down, and I made the best of them. And if wrestling is about confidence inside and outside in the ring, and the one thing I'll say about myself is no matter what you give me to work with, it's going to come out pretty good. I'm going to make the best of it, and I'm going to make it work, which I'm proud of. That's, you know, some people want to be the main event guy, which I do, but I also want to be the guy that's very reliable, and I know that no matter what, I could always do a good job.
Fantastic explanation. The only thing I would add as far as that goes, me looking back on, you accepted everything that you were given, but I honestly felt like there was that next level for you, and I kind of feel like you're right. It seemed like every time you got thrown into either the manager / bodyguard situation versus tag team, you did get thrown into those a lot, and they kind of kept you in that niche. I really felt like at some point, maybe with the bodyguard still, not so much the tag team because it's difficult to break away from the tag team division at that point. But I really felt like you had that next level that they never quite took you there. It was always somebody else for the most part, allowing you to not get that big singles run. That being said, and just from an outside perspective, was there ever? I mean, 7 years. You were there for a lot of change in TNA, a lot, and because it's such a big part of your career, I'm just kind of curious. Was it the whirlwind that everybody kind of sees from the outside with all the changes that went on from management, etc.? Did it feel that way to you? Did it go by fast because of it? Was it challenging as a result for you to kind of find your role, feel your way around some of the new management changes and some of the characters that obviously came in there? Did it seem like such a whirlwind to you inside of it as it does to some of the spectators on the outside?
At the beginning, yeah, when changes are made and you're used to something and you think people like you and then you got to start all over again getting people to like you, yeah. But towards the end, when it seemed like there was new, management and writers every few months, it kind of got to the point, and I think I could speak for most of the roster when I say this, where it's just like, whatever. You just get immune to it. You kind of stopped. I don't want to say stopped caring, but it is what it is, man. When it happens so often, you just kind of
sure.
You don't want to waste time over it anymore. And until like something drastic happens to you, I wasn't even paying attention. It's like, oh, we got someone new in charge. Cool.
Right,
so what are
right.
we eating? What's the catering? What's the catering today?
So talk a little bit about your departure. What don't have to go into a ton because I know again some of the same questions are asked to you every interview that you do, but just for our listeners and stuff, kind of a quick version of why you decided to leave.
It's really just as simple as I feel not only does ROBBIE E still have more to offer the wrestling world, but the world in general, and I just wasn't, plain and simple, just wasn't getting that opportunity. So at 34 years old, it's like, man, if I'm going to make moves and do some more stuff in wrestling, I got to do it now. So peace.
Do you consider too, from a timing aspect, Nick and I have talked about this on the show, and I'm sure being a wrestler inside of it, I'm kind of curious if you see this the same way. I've never really asked anybody. We haven't had a whole lot of guests, like I said, in a while. The landscape as far as WWE, which I would imagine is kind of your mecca, your top of the mountain, as it would be for any wrestler at this point, and you can still have a successful career overseas. You can still do a lot of stuff on the independent, which the independent circuit is obviously growing in popularity these days. From what I can tell, I think social media has a lot to do with that and the expansion of it. But when you look back, first we'll talk a little bit about the indie scene in a minute, but I want to ask you about WWE. The landscape as of, what was it, maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it was completely different. A TNA guy or an Impact guy or somebody building their career elsewhere outside of WWE really didn't have an opportunity, whether you want to give credit to a Triple H or Stephanie or whoever at this point is changing some of the landscape for WWE, their developmental program, kind of bringing people through the ranks that way. Maybe that's opening the doors for a lot of new people. But when you see the migration of the AJ Styles, Samoa Joes, Bobby Roodes, etc., that have gone on and now get their opportunity to shine and truly shine, not even be held back in any way, shape, or form. They're getting an opportunity. Is that how you kind of see it as well? I mean, when you look at WWE and some of the changes they've had over the years, and did that have anything to do with kind of your timing as well? I mean, if your decision to leave would have been 5 years ago, if you were contemplating that, maybe you wouldn't have done it. Does WWE's landscape now was that any reason as far as the timing? Did it give you a little bit more hope that you could land there as well?
Well, I mean, yeah, 1,000%. Now, they don't care about anything about your past for the most part. It's just, they want the best guys in the world.
Sure.
Which is a smart approach. Why wouldn't you want the best guys in the world? So they're getting everybody. So yeah, it's nice to know that, the opportunity is there as far as like TNA not hurting my name to go there. But I still don't know if that fully had to do with the reason that I left. I think in my time, I'd done everything I could do in TNA anyway, and it was time to go.
It's time to move on, yeah.
I mean, the fact that all these guys that I, was super close friends with and still am, AJ and Joe and Bobby and EY, that they're getting blasted all over everybody's TV screens and they're on the biggest stage of them all. More props to them. I'm happy for them and proud of them.
Then on the indie scene, I mean, you've been working it for a while as well, since you've left and everything. I know you've been active and everything. So as I think, and I'm not exactly sure all of the places that you've worked. I know you've definitely been working some of the indie scene since you departed TNA. Are you feeling a little bit better about kind of the opportunities outside of WWE or TNA? It seems to me, and I get asked more questions about the independent scene than I ever have since we've returned. I don't remember the independent circuit really being as popular as it is now. Do you feel that and sense that as you're starting to become a lot more active there? And what do you accredit that to?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of places where you could go and make money besides WWE, whether it's, like you said, overseas stuff. There's New Japan and AAA in Mexico. And then there's just independents now that are big, that are money-making companies like PWG and Wrestle Circus and all these other big ones. So there really is a lot of places to go. Why it's happening, I mean, I don't really know. I think it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing. It's great for the wrestlers. They're getting a lot of work, but I just think that there's almost too much of it where it's kind of being oversaturated for the fans, where, every few towns you have a different wrestling show and, you're seeing the same wrestlers and the same kind of matches where, eventually it's going to catch up, and I think it's going to kind of kill itself out because there's going to be too much of it, Less is more, in my opinion. And when you have a wrestling school in every other town and a wrestling show in every other town, I mean, how many can fans go to? How many shows could they afford and buy tickets to?
That's a good point.
If they weren't as often and they were spread out more, I think it would last longer. That's just my opinion,
Yeah. That's a good point. I didn't think about that. Almost an oversaturation effect.
I mean, you have Major League Baseball, you have minor league baseball, and, it's spread out. You don't have a million other baseball games you could go to for the most part in every town or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah, no. And I do think that obviously now with social media and stuff, we're seeing, we're hearing, we're watching a little bit more than we used to as well. And so some of this stuff is kind of overkill. And of course, WWE is if you're, most of the time, if you're a wrestling fan, you're following that. And there's so much WWE these days as well. And it does kind of become a little harder for you to stand out. But it's good as a wrestler, as you mentioned, though, for you to have the opportunity and the options, at least, where you can actually go make some money. Really kind of want to jump into a little bit of the personal side of things, too, because I find it interesting where you're no longer single guy. You're no longer living the gimmick. I heard you, I say recently, it's in the last, last year or so, year and a half. Not only have you gotten married, but you've also had twins. You've had kids. So I would imagine kind of balancing that life-work balance, or whatever you want to call it, has been a little unique to you. Talk a little bit more about kind of how that has been for you. I'm a father myself of two, just had a newborn about 10 months ago as well. He's 10 months old. I've got a 10-year-old, daughter as well. But I know what type of transition that is and what type of change. So how's that affected, obviously, your career as it relates to wrestling?
Well, I mean, dude, during the week when I'm at home, I usually travel on the weekends, and then my wife travels a lot during the week. So we miss each other a lot. So, like, during the week, I'm alone with my twins, and it's like freaking daddy daycare. It's hilarious. I take them to dance class. They come with me to the gym. We go food shopping. It's just like me all day with them when she's not home. And if you could just be like, I should have my own reality show. Because it's just so funny. They're a trip, man. They're my best friends, and they keep me occupied and entertained every single day.
I'm picturing it. I'm picturing it right now. I feel like you honestly should be one of those that video's huge these days. There's a lot of guys I follow that they really, you can pretty much create your own reality show online these days. And I just picture a camera just following you around trying to juggle both. You've got your wrestling career on the weekends and stuff, as you mentioned, and then during the, you turn into daddy mode and and you're filming pretty much everything behind the scenes. I would imagine that it would be a trip to watch.
Yeah, well, if you follow me, Real Robbie E on Instagram, and then follow them, Cash and Carter Inc. on Instagram,
Nice.
You could see a lot of it because I'm posting videos of us all the time. And yeah, they almost have like 3,000 followers on Instagram, so they're blowing up too. And then, of course, we can't forget about my 5-pound Chihuahua Prancer,
Right.
who she has an Instagram also, Prancer Pants. So
You gotta
my
love
family's all over.
social media these days. So what are your goals right now? I mean, you seem like the type that just kind of takes any opportunity you get, runs with it, does the best you can, etc. And you're uber talented. I definitely was always a huge fan of yours. Just I'm not a big over the top gimmicky guy. As far as a fan goes, I really do like kind of the serious, cool, suave, the type of guys that you want to look up to, the guys that, as nerdy as I am, but I want to be the guys that feels like they're living that life, and larger than life, etc. And you always carried that persona very, very well. So I can tell that you take everything that you're given, but I know you've got aspirations. I know you've got goals. What is it 10 years from now when you look back, whether you're active in that still or not, that part of your career or whatever, but what is it that's left for you to accomplish? And be semi-specific, too. If it's WWE or whatever the case may be, what do you want to accomplish in the wrestling business going forward?
Well, I mean, I'm 34, and I feel like I'm in the best shape of my life. I have 18 years experience. I started wrestling when I was 16. So I'm a very confident guy. I'm more confident than ever. And my goal is to continue to wrestle full-time as my job, where, I support my family and everything with pro wrestling.
Sure.
But out of all of the, options I would have, if I could choose any, what would be my number one way to do it? Yes, 1,000% WWE. I think most people would choose that. But I would also still be happy just saying, hey, I'm wrestling and supporting my family, doing something else, as long as it involved wrestling. And then later on, when I get older, I would love to look into agenting and writing and that kind of stuff, or a trainer, just because I would always love to be around it. And, yeah, but besides that, I mean, dude, Mondays on Muscle and Fitness, I got my Dad Bod Destroyer videos. Tuesdays on Fight TV, I got my Real Robbie E videos, which follow my life around.
Yeah.
Wednesdays, I got my podcast, Wyatt Ended. Thursdays, I have a fitness video every week on men's fitness, which is huge, called Back to the Basics. And then Friday, Saturday, and Sundays, I'm freaking all over the place traveling wrestling. So I am still
You're all
I'm
over the place,
busy as
yeah,
hell.
busy.
I'm all over the place, man. I'm a hustler. I want to keep my name out there and making as many connections as I can, which I do. And, I mean, that's what it's all about in 2018.
Man, I think it's great, and I want to plug again the podcast. I think it's great that you're taking a unique approach to it with something different, and Wyatt Ended. It's I hope that regardless, and a lot of this time, this is just kind of the marketer in me and the guy that's been in that area for a long time. I hope that if you do kind of get back on television, whether it's WWE, if you ever had the interest, I assume you wouldn't obviously at this point, but maybe you would go back to an Impact, whatever it may be. I hope that some of these outside projects that you do that are kind of help building your personal brand, you keep doing, because it's fun to follow. You're one of those that you can just put a raw camera on and you don't need a whole lot of scripts at all. You just go with it and you're entertaining. The podcast is great. I hope that you keep that up regardless of what you do. But the podcast right now is obviously going very well after that first week. Talk about it. You have a couple. You have guests and everything. Some other guests who's coming up this week. I think there's one dropping tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. Tell people why they should go listen to it.
Well, yeah, our first guest was Glacier, and our second guest was Muhammad Hassan from who's
yes.
and who was someone who's I think is perfect for a show of Wyatt Ended, because a lot of people do not know the real story of Wyatt Ended, and I promise when you do listen to it, it dropped this past Wednesday. When you listen to it, you're gonna have a holy shit moment.
Because I remember
really
it was he had a little controversy surrounding him.
He had a lot of controversy.
Yeah, and it wasn't even his fault. I mean, from what we read or what we heard. So that's going to be fascinating to kind of get it from the horse's mouth, because he's also remained kind of like the whole point of your show, the premise of your show, kind of fallen off the face. He's really remained about as quiet as any wrestler I've ever remember being after he leaves a major company in such a fashion. He really has been kind of under a rock.
And that he's out of the wrestling. He wants nothing to do with it. And a lot of people, hasn't done many interviews.
Yeah.
And that's what this show is all about. It's giving fans something, a new story to hear. So I encourage everyone to tune in.
iTunes, and of course WyattEnded.com. Robbie, I know there's a ton to cover. I wanted to kind of do a broad brush to kind of just go through a little bit of everything to get it all in. Would love to have you come on eventually for an extended interview, maybe a video, bring you on video and everything like that. Really appreciate you taking the time, though. Good luck to everything that you've got going on. I know we'll all be following, of course, checking out the podcast in the meantime. Anything else, though, that you want to put? You got any big shows coming up that you want to let people know about?
Just mainly my Instagram, Real Robbie E, and my Twitter, Robbie E Impact. And you can follow all my upcoming shows and everything going on in my life. So give me a follow, and we'll connect.
Guys, Robbie E, and go check him out all over the internet. He's extremely busy. Robbie, I really appreciate you coming on. For Robbie E, of course, Nick Paglino, I'm Chris Cash with the Voice of Wrestling. We'll see you next week.